Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the 7th Global Entrepreneurship Conference, which is hosted by Qatar Development Bank. Today, we welcome the first panel discussion of Road Qatar 2021. My name is Saud Al-Bouainain, Communications and Partnerships Senior Manager at Qatar Development Bank, and I'll be moderating today's session, titled Market Penetration, Reorienting for Growth Opportunities in a Post-Pandemic Economy. We have an esteemed panelist joining us today for this topic, Mr. Francesco Betti, Head of Shaping the Future of Advanced Manufacturing and Value Chains at the World Economic Forum. Welcome, Francesco. Mr. Mark Penzel, Founder and President of Startup Genome. We welcome you for today's panel, Mark. Ms. Laura Bakar, Head of Retail and Private Holdings at Google Cloud. Welcome you to the studio.
Thank you so much.
And last but not least, Mr. Saleh Al-Khalifi, Undersecretary for Trade Affairs at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of Qatar. Marhaba, welcome Saleh.
Marhaba.
Thank you all for joining us and helping us bring a diverse perspective to this conversation. Today's discussion carries special importance for entrepreneurs and SMEs in today's rapidly changing business environment. Opportunities thrive as industries are reinvented and new value chains are formed to reshape the economic landscape towards a more resilient future. And for an entrepreneur, to reorient for growth, they would need to reevaluate their perspective and adopt a mindset that positions them for success within the current global economic condition. So we'll start off today's panel with the first question going towards Francesco, World Economic Forum, of course. So one critical transition taking place globally is that from an industrial economy to a new digital consumer economy. How can entrepreneurs, especially those in industrial and manufacturing sectors, reorganize their thinking around the shift towards achieving growth?
Well, let me maybe, first of all, thank you and all our colleagues for hosting us today. Delighted to be at this very important event with all my colleagues on stage or virtual stage. I think that what maybe we need to question first is, I don't really know whether we are entering a new economy or if what we are seeing it's an evolution, right, or a continuous evolution of our global economy. What for sure we are seeing, and we saw especially with COVID-19, it's a massive acceleration of this transition to digital and digitalization. Now, something that maybe is fair to say is that COVID-19 brought onto us a sort of a perfect storm, right? That disrupted especially the space of operations, manufacturing, supply chain in an unprecedented way. I mean, for the very first time, we saw disruptions coming simultaneously both from the demand and supply side of value chains, right? That was really unprecedented. It was extremely tough, both for national governments and also our companies to be able to respond and react. However, what is important to mention is that this perfect storm that COVID-19 brought onto us was already sort of forming the horizon before COVID-19. I mean, the transformations that we are seeing now that got accelerated with COVID, started much earlier and were mainly the result of the combination of different mega trends. But it's when you really put together, the fourth industrial revolution and what technology is allowing companies to do today, especially on the digitalization front, so thanks to digitalization and digital transformation. And you add to that climate change, and you add to that, all the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing across the world. Someone could argue that those mega trends in combination were already forming this perfect storm, and therefore pushing companies, manufacturing companies, to transform their strategies and to develop what I call new digital capabilities. I think to answer your question, I think that if we are trying to drive companies, and especially in the manufacturing and operation space, and we want to successfully navigate the future, we do need to develop new digital capabilities. We need to rethink our supply chain strategies and looking at new ways for building resiliency. And we do need to look at the approach that we are taking to to technology, I think that very often we look at technology as a given, as a mass. I think that we need to take a very practical approach. Those companies who were most successful to navigate the COVID-19 crisis were those who took a very practical approach to technology, trying to identify the very specific, let's say, operational or business issues that we are trying to address. And then maybe something else that I want to highlight, and we'll conclude with that, is that most successful companies are not just those who are investing in technology, but those who are investing in technology and people. We saw companies who massively went for upskilling and reskilling efforts, being extremely successful in reaching new levels of agility, flexibility that are going to be required going forward. And if you ask me about the upcoming months and the upcoming years, I think that, main capability that companies need to develop is adaptability, the ability to adapt. If you look at the combination of mega trends that I was referring to and the future outlook, I think it's fair to assume that crisis will be happening more often with deeper consequences, and therefore we need to have the ability to move fast back to digital. That's an amazing tool, an amazing way to build resiliency, flexibility, and agility.
Thank you so much, Francesco. So actually, I really liked your ideas behind transforming strategies and technology. Investing in technology and people would definitely be the future of this industry in general. And the ability to adapt is also key in ensuring business sustainability for these companies in these sectors. So maybe I'd like to also move to our colleagues here in the studio, and this question is to the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Saleh. So are policies and regulations keeping pace with the rapid changes in the global economy? And how can regulators and policymakers facilitate SMEs' growth in today's constantly evolving business environment?
Thank you, Saud, and thank you, QDB, for this great initiative. We've been supporting Road since day one, and we're happy on the impact it's creating both for entrepreneurs and SMEs in Qatar. As Francesco said, I think no one expected this pandemic to happen, but we were already pushing frontiers. I know the Industry 4.0 document, I call it, the manifesto, was published 2016, 2017, and most global economies were in a race to cut red tape, to come up with new policies to enable and support the SMEs and entrepreneurs that are usually 2 steps ahead of regulators. We've been trying to put our hands with the global players, with large corporates, to come up with solutions such as sandboxes, such as incubators, accelerators, to have a safe space where innovators, entrepreneurs can come, can make mistakes under a controlled environment to ensure not only no one from the either financial sector, but only from the consumer side is being protected. You can't choose any industry that had the top 5 at least going bankrupt, hitting a wall, and then new regulations come up like a phoenix, from the ashes to set the way forward for industries. What we're trying to do is, I'm not only supporting our young innovators, but what I've seen in the pandemic is I'm very proud of I don't want to call them the legacy companies, but the large corporates in Qatar that have shifted overnight to being agile. I did not expect this agility from them. And our role and maybe the big advantage we have here in Qatar is being a small economy that I can name any client in Qatar, any challenge they have with almost 24/7 connectivity to come up with a solution for a tailor-made solution, a tailor-made policy for their solution. And this is, I think, one of the advantages being here in Qatar. Not only that, it's usually might be one phone call away. Any SME is one phone call away from the policymaker, whether it's from the Ministry of Commerce or any other ministry. We've seen companies either in the fintech space coming up rapidly. I would say the growth year on year is more than 1,000%. We've got players in the e-commerce space. And as I mentioned earlier, the old large listed companies are making quick moves to the digital supply chain economy. So I'm very happy that this happened.
So thank you, Salah. I think you added really interesting points towards maybe the openness of the ministry when it comes to dealing directly with these SMEs in this ecosystem. Maybe I just had one follow-up question. When do you think these SMEs would evolve in the future, given the kind of support you're providing to them across so many sectors and different tools we're providing to them as well? How can we maybe potentially see these SME grow to become these pioneers in their field, or Doha and more than this regional space?
We shouldn't be waiting, Saud. Already so many Qatari companies have branches out of Doha that they're collaborating and exporting their products and services. But the big advantage is having the global powerhouses here in Qatar, whether it's the supply chain of the oil and gas, whether it's the logistics, the mega logistics we have here in Qatar. Finding these SMEs already selling their products on, and supplying to Qatar Airways, supplying to our big companies abroad, and working with large international companies like Google, like Microsoft here in Doha. All these companies are based and being supplied by local SMEs as we speak. So we're not waiting for local companies to grow. Some of them are already there and have made it.
Great. Thank you, Saleh. So I think we'll move to our guest, Mark. Welcome, Mark. I hope you had a safe flight last night. So maybe we'll start. The question is, when talking about identifying and leveraging opportunities, where do you see the innovation and disruption intersect, basically within that scope?
First of all, thank you so much for having us. It's been a huge pleasure to arrive here in Qatar, and I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. As some of you maybe know, we work with government leaders mainly across 50 countries to help them navigate these huge transformational shifts my previous panelists have been referring to. And one framework that is applicable to entrepreneurs as well as policymakers is what we call the Innovation Edge framework, where we try to understand on a global level, what are the global trends and what is the performance level of each technology subsectors that are out there, and how does that relate to the performance that we're seeing at the local level here in Qatar, but also elsewhere in the world. And then, for those where we see strong global and strong local potential, of course, we want to build out these competitive advantages. But I think what's important for us to realize is in today's transformational times, we also need to understand and expand on some of the trends that, perhaps are not taking place in Qatar yet, but where we see huge global potential and huge transformational powers. And that is true for entrepreneurs as well, right? We need to understand what our strengths are. We need to focus on our competitive advantage. But at the same time, we also need to hedge risk and understand what technologies could potentially threaten our business model and adjust accordingly.
So I think great points, Mark. Maybe I just had one follow-up question to that. So maybe if you can highlight the sweet spot when it comes to the balance of risk and uncertainty with sustainability and growth. So I think if you can maybe highlight that to the viewers, that would be very interesting to them to find out more about.
Absolutely. Well, what we're seeing at the moment is that technology is really disrupting literally every business sector that we're engaging in. And it's very, very hard to come up with a one-size-fits-all approach. But what I will say is that in order for you to have the big picture in mind, in order for you to see the opportunities and the risks on an ongoing basis, you need to remove yourself from operational duties as top management, and you really need to free your calendar in order to think more and engage with top experts globally more on some of the bigger questions in the 21st century. And I will mention one area because we have Francesco from the World Economic Forum here. I'm a huge fan of some of their publications, and the Global Risk Report that they put out is really an essential piece for me to understand how to navigate some of the key risks that we face as society, but also as business leaders in the 21st century.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your valuable addition. So once businesses adopt the right mindset for growth in a new economy, their ways of doing business can be seen as the next piece of the puzzle when creating and harnessing opportunities. So I'd like to also welcome our guest in the studio, Laurie. So that question is addressed to you. What role does automation play in achieving scalability and in gaining a competitive edge in the marketplace?
Excellent. First, thanks a lot for having me. It's an honor being here for the first time for Google Cloud and for myself. To answer your questions, I was looking up about the subject, preparing for this meeting, and I thought, okay, automation is actually very different if you talk to small organizations and big organizations. And what we see is actually that small organizations or SMEs are less likely to adopt automation. But on the flip of that, and what's very interesting is that actually once they do decide to adopt and to take on that journey to automate their processes, they're actually more successful than large enterprise. And this is actually because large enterprises have large, complex IT and technology setup that make their move to automation a little bit slower and probably a little bit more complex. So once small organizations decide to automate, they have three choices to make. They can choose between three approaches, depending on the differentiation they want and the openness for complexity that they want to, that they can afford really in terms of resource, talent, etc. So the three are really, or they buy, okay, I buy an algorithm or a machine learning or AI process that has been created and is out on the market. I customize, so I take something that's being built, I can buy, but I will customize on top incrementally, or I build from scratch, right? And as you move from buy to build, you'll have more complexity, but also usually more value, a little bit more tailored. There's nothing which is better or not. It's really depending on the access to resource and talent you have and the time you're willing to invest in terms of the problem you're trying to solve. And I think this is, back to your question, the key point in choosing what to automate and what to invest in automation is really pinpointing the problems you want to solve and what is going to bring most value, because you cannot automate everything. And probably you could adopt thousands of use cases, but not every single one of them will make sense for you. And it's very important to pinpoint that one single let's say, business problem or challenge that will bring most value, especially in the beginning.
So I think you brought a really good point, because I believe when people come up with the idea of automation, they believe that it's the one-stop shop solution to all kind of headaches that they would face. But I think putting it in this kind of framework, which makes it very simple, so the buy and customize and build is a very nice way of thinking about it, to be honest, and putting it in this perspective. So if we would say which of these three angles are most people focusing on, which angle would people be more invested in engaging with?
To be frank, as Google Cloud, we invest in the three of them because it really depends on the use case. And what we do is really partner with our customers to find out which one makes sense for them. Sometimes you just want a routing solution for your delivery trucks, right? And you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to schedule your routing as such the fastest way, right? But sometimes you want to actually differentiate and be like, okay, I have a limitation on my assets, and I really need something tailored for me. And I need to bring other data sets like, weather forecast. I want to, mitigate risk on my operation if a driver is sick. If you want to go the extra mile, if you want to differentiate more in the market, you will direct yourself more there. What we've invested a lot at Google is on the customized angle as well. Why? Because a lot of the barrier to automate is the access to talent. And we've seen that you don't have data scientists all over the place. You need to, So Google has invested in and developed some tools that are called AutoML, Auto Machine Learning, which actually gives access to non-technology talents to tools to train models. So me, tomorrow, I can start actually train a model to recognize Laurie in any picture online, or to recognize yourself. I can start recognizing QDB logo or Road logo. I can start building those things. And this is what really we strive for, is to give more access to that technology and bring that automation in a more democratized way to the market, which I think will help SMEs and smaller organizations.
I think great points, Lori. I think maybe the new shift and focus globally is cloud, right? So cloud is being the it thing right now, and people are trying to invest so much on this, on these tools. So maybe where does cloud computing fit within the context in general, and why should people go towards that angle of storage or for utilization of their resources and so on?
I'll answer from my perspective, right? For me, the cloud, what it brings is, especially when we're talking new businesses, entrepreneurs, it brings the ability to start small and scale to any size, right, really. And that's really important, but because, for instance, if you have startups starting in Qatar and they really are digital natives and they build their technology structure to be agile from the start, they will be able to bring their products actually internationally and globally. And the pandemic has really helped in that, accelerate that movement. But you will be able to bring your services or products globally at scale very quickly if you're set up on cloud, because it gives you huge scalability, elasticity, depending on your services, of course. But it also gives you, unprecedented security. You're using the technology that Google is using. We are using ourselves for search, YouTube, all our service maps every day. So you're actually relying on a very robust infrastructure at the back end, which I think is giving a lot of confidence. And it's accessible to anyone, really. It scales to zero. If you're not using, you're not paying, and scales up to any size that you want, which I think is really the value.
I think I can add to that. During the pandemic, and I'd really like to thank both Google and Microsoft for providing their services for SMEs. So we have a deal with Google to provide their work space, and Microsoft to provide 365 to local companies. So what ended up happening is my daughter's school, for example, they've got their emails on Google, so no need for servers, no need for cost. They've got their security cameras, where me as a parent, I can log in through Google, through the cloud. They've got their, my daughter used to attend class during the digital communication methods. So for a company to do that, as you said, instead of going and developing everything from scratch, they buy it off the shelf. And again, maybe they had to customize some things. Maybe if they were growing and then to be more efficient, they might customize it. But we've seen overnight people just connecting to the dot. One of the things that, again, you read it in the literature always about change management is you have to have a blackout date, a date where you tell them, oops, you can't access the old system. And I think the pandemic was a great accelerator to this digital adoption, where they just woke up and they couldn't access their, their schools, their physical showrooms, and again, we had this quick partnerships with the data service providers to provide the services and to get them connected as soon as possible.
So I think Saleh placed also a good spin to it, since it's the local ecosystem versus a global company with its own mission and vision, right, to enable
not versus, hand in hand. And I think this is the big advantage of having these multinationals here in Qatar.
Agreed. We're definitely always happy to have Google Cloud here and supporting the local ecosystem and developing them in a digital manner. Maybe going back to our participants as well from virtually. So maybe this question goes to you, Francesco. So as we transition to a new economy, where do agile teams come into play in the value chain, especially when planning a new venture or market offering in general? I'd actually love to hear more from you about that.
Apologies, I was on mute, but the answer is absolutely. I think that an agile approach, an agile methodology overall is going to be essential going forward. Think about the approach to technology adoption, what it was mentioning before, and that some of my colleagues reinforce as well, but they need to take a very practical approach, be able to work in sprints, to develop new use cases, very specific applications that are tailored to the needs of any company. I think that that's going to be an essential key for succeeding in this transition towards a more digital world of operations, or more broadly digital economy. The second is that what we are seeing as well is that successful companies, and it really doesn't matter whether it's big companies or small companies, but they're starting to look at the formation of teams in new ways, right? They're bringing together people with OT skills and capabilities with people with IT skills and capabilities, people who have been on the shop floor, on the job for 20 years, with new joiners, new entrants. And what is that creating? It's amazing dynamics, right? In which maybe the newcomers help push the digital agenda, while the those who have been in the job for a long time have the, let's say, the strong and more specific know-how. But it's that combination that is helping companies build new OT/IT teams that are being able to successfully navigate the current context by accelerating, again, the adoption of technology. Again, Agile is going to be critical, but it's not the only piece of the equation, right? It's Agile with the new way in which teams can be formed, with the need, again, to work on digital literacy and to upgrade the skills of every single employee in a given organization to be able to adopt and have a digital competitive edge. And then finally, I think it's the need to, and we were mentioning before, is the need to look at what is the right level of technology automation that I need to navigate this current context. What was interesting is that during the pandemic, those companies who were more flexible, more agile, that were able to adapt faster, were those who found a new balance in between, let's say, automation and worker augmentation. And what I mean by worker augmentation is putting technology at the services of employees, right? Helping them improve productivity by leveraging new use cases, new digital interfaces, new digital solutions. You can also push the boundaries and think about, virtual augmented reality. But it's really that idea of putting the individual, the worker, the employee at the center, and then thinking about the specific needs that you need to address through the adoption of technologies, of new solutions, and doing that with an agile approach that allows you to learn, fail fast, and be able to address the exactly pain points. Something that the Undersecretary mentioned before that is extremely important is this concept of making test beds, capability centers, creating safe spaces in which companies, especially entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized enterprises, can get in touch with technology, get in touch with expertise, get in touch with consultants, get in touch with representatives from the larger OEMs to be able to pilot experiments and try new solutions. And again, with a very agile mindset and approach. So I think that all these ingredients are the ones that are critical for companies to succeed going forward.
Thank you so much, Francesco. I think I'll try to take one point and also push it towards Mark here. So Mark, I think there was a really nice discussion around digital literacy and SMEs to identify what are their requirements when it comes to automation to ensure that they get the right solutions and tools to better assist their operations on a daily manner and enhances their whole business in general. So maybe which areas should entrepreneurs focus their attention on to intelligently and efficiently act on emerging opportunities and market trends? So what are the future shifts in these priorities? Mark, if I would say, given the great research that have been done from Startup Genome across the global scene, I think you would have some sort of advice when it comes to entrepreneurs having focus on emerging opportunities and market trends.
Well, first of all, I want to mention that from a company point of view, from a mindset point of view, it's really important that you develop a culture inside of your company where everyone is an entrepreneur and everyone can help you as top management identify upcoming opportunities for you and for your company. And it typically starts with what I like to call as a bottom-up approach, where people inside of the organization take responsibility, take leadership to confirm with top management what they're seeing, what it means for the business, So really promoting that culture of agility, I think, starts with a bottom-up approach and empowering your employees to identify market opportunities together with you. And I think, from a market point of view, what we're seeing at the moment, and I mentioned this before, is that literally every different aspect of human life is right now being transformed, right? And it's, for example, about educating ourselves, right? We see a lot of new business models that are trying to completely reshape the way universities are functioning, right? They are remote in the 21st century. They are mobile first, and they really focus on a curriculum that responds to the challenges that we're seeing in today's times. We're also seeing a shift in how we buy our groceries, for example, right? There is now flash supermarkets delivering groceries within 30 minutes to your doorstep, or medications being delivered within 30 minutes to your doorstep. And it's for all of us to really go back and in each of the industries, really look at what the opportunities are and how we can respond to that with our core strengths and core opportunities. From a global point of view, because you mentioned our global startup ecosystem report, perhaps we're seeing a very strong trend towards more deep tech focused SMEs and startups. So it's not only the 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds in t-shirts that are building e-commerce business models, right? But it's more and more the 40, 45, 50-year-old entrepreneurs that bring together an innovative mindset with deep sectoral expertise in order to fundamentally shift the way businesses are being built in life sciences, in advanced manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera.
So thank you so much, Mark. It actually flows in very smoothly with my next point to Mr. Saleh. So you shed a really important, let's say, shed some light on tech companies based on the reports the Startup Genome creates, that it's the future of the business scene globally, and it's the best tools and methods of practicing business. And maybe you've also touched on the importance of, I think, since there is a great market opportunity during the pandemic of creating digital shopping for supermarkets, digital shopping of every kind of product and service online. So it would ease this kind of business B2C interaction. So my question to Saleh is, do entrepreneurs need to embrace the digital economy and also on-demand workforce to succeed in the new economy? So when I say the digital economy, I meant, the freelancers with the customers kind of interactions. So we have areas like Uber, the food delivery,
the gig
apps,
economy.
The gig economy, yes.
Very interesting, and this is something we've been looking at a lot. And sometimes it's good to be, it's not always good to be the first mover advantage. It's good to be the second mover advantage, because I think, I look at it as a semi-structured or a micro businesses rather than call it the gig economy. The downside of the gig economy, and something that we're trying to avoid heavily, is unfair practices to the freelancers. What ends up happening is, if I'm on the side of the businesses, they would love to have labor, to have freelancers working with no liability on their hand, no liability to train them, no liability to knowledge transfer, and even no sense of leadership. They are disposable resources. What we're trying to do is having it as a structured play, whether it's, especially when it comes to the lower and lower skill structured, we only allow it to be within a small business supply chain. So Uber in Qatar or any delivery in Qatar can only work with micro companies that might be teams of 5, teams of 4, to ensure everyone within the supply chain has health insurance. If anything happens to them, someone is responsible for that person's well-being, and also to ensure that there's good quality being delivered to the product. On the other hand, we're holding also the entrepreneurs accountable to raise the capability of these micro businesses, to ensure they're building this team culture within their supply chain. On the other hand, we're seeing freelancers, developers, in the creative and let's say IT industries. And as Mark mentioned, this culture is being changed into they're forming together, whether it's within hackathons and creating smaller teams to work together. I would always want to have it in a more structured form, and that's why it's super easy. And soon we're pushing for legislation to make it free to start up your own company for the first year, because as you said, it's a sandbox. So you jump in, you create a company, play around with it for the first year. You didn't like it, you can close it off, no questions asked. I would rather do that to move people from the shadow economy, from the gig economy, to let them establish businesses so that they can growth and to have the normal economic cycle. We do encourage freelancers and high-tech individuals to work together, collaborate, create teams. Either they can be a team by themselves, create their own company, join a team, or even just consult and be a consultant, the third party for a certain startup. But what you also, on the other hand, we don't want to see any of the downsides of the gig economy.
So I think, Saleh, thank you so much for this addition. I believe it's very important to also articulate our policies in the government of Qatar to ensure the safety and well-being of all members of the economical cycle. So people working at the lower end would have, as you mentioned, health insurance, would have the support they would need to deliver their jobs. And us as a country, we need to have a stable kind of an economy and workforce that will enable us to expand our operations to not only Doha but also go internationally. My next question would go to Google Cloud and has something to do with the digital analytics and data. So through the smart use of data and analytics, can SMEs enhance their ability to capture and leverage market penetration opportunities?
Yes, of course. So I love that question because, of course, yes, this is actually the core of what we do as Google is make sense of data to bring business value. But it will depend how you look at analytics. I think there are four really big analytics segments which have different impact on businesses. So the first one would be descriptive analytics, really telling you what happened in the past. Then you have diagnosis analytics, which is telling you what happened in the past and probably a few options as of why, really. And that's, let's say, the historical legacy analytics portion. And then you have where it starts getting interesting and where we really start getting value in terms of market penetration is predictive analytics, which is, okay, we're going to start trending and seeing what is likely to happen. And then the last one would be prescriptive analytics, and which is really where the value is and is really telling you, going as far as telling you what to do based on what is likely to happen. So I think really the value is in the second two, the latest two. But of course, to get that value, you need to have the ground set up and the data available and ready to deliver on those analytics use case. I think the trend is a lot to getting closer to get real-time data being fed into your legacy data that you have as a company. You might have, CRM, supply chain, a lot of different things feeding into your systems. It's very important to also have feeds into real-time data. Why is that? Because, I'm going to take a retail example, but for instance, looking at historical data in the winter in Qatar, you might sell a lot more meat because people are having barbecue in Sea Line, and I don't know, but you might have a spike, and you think, okay, so probably tomorrow it's winter, good weather, weekend, you'll sell a lot of meat. But if you have as simple as that, a real-time feed and stream of data telling you that tomorrow there is actually a big storm being forecasted, you will plan your inventory accordingly, and if you can forecast 10 days ahead, then probably you'll have less waste, you'll save on your stocks, and you will not miss out on an opportunity and serve the market with what they need, which is something probably different. So this is really where I see analytics really becoming part of our lives if companies have the right setup at the back end and partner with their technology vendors in order to get there, because it's a journey. It depends a little bit how the access to data is in different cases, but this is really what's important. And to finish and close off, I think a lot of the value in the analytics is probably in personalization and customization. So once you understand those trends and you can predict, etc., you really see that you can make more valuable services being very tailored to, you know, what I would need or what you would need. You really customize your services, but also your marketing. Meaning you're not going to be telling everybody, look, this is 20% off for everybody. No, I'm not going to be blanketing my market with money that I'm not sure is going to bring return to me. I'm going to target my high-value customers that love my brand and that will actually respond. And I will target them with the right product and services, meaning you will spend less and you will have higher return on your marketing spend. So I think it's twofold, but definitely analytics, I'm very passionate about the subject. I can talk about this for hours, but definitely analytics is high value for small and large organizations today.
Sure. So I think also data is a very important topic here that would link us to Francesco. Maybe since we're moving towards supply chain, and supply chain definitely depends on data being available to the entrepreneur and to the SME once they wanted to engage in any B2B or B2C engagement. So what are the key supply chain changes to watch out for as a new venture, or how do they affect an SME chances of success in the marketplace?
Absolutely. I think that what it's important to understand is that especially large OEMs in the manufacturing space, I mean, they're all trying to build resiliency across manufacturing and supply systems. I mean, I mentioned before that, you know, when you look at the future outlook, right, and the combination of the fourth industrial revolution that continues evolving at an incredible pace, climate change, you know, socioeconomic and geopolitical global tensions, I think that what manufacturing companies are trying to do is to come up with a new strategy that will allow them to navigate a scenario in which you know, crises and disruptions may happen on a continuous basis, or at least more often. I'm definitely an optimist, and I believe that companies and humans, you know, have the ability, and now in addition to that, we have the technology to be able to do that. But it is fair to assume that we need to prepare for a future in which, you know, disruptions will continue happening. We won't stop them, right? And for COVID-19, we have a vaccine. I mean, we don't know, for example, for climate change or other, you know, disruptions, whether we can come up with a solution, you know, as fast as we can. I mean, the efforts at COP26 right now are incredible and amazing. We all need to move fast. And I believe that technology, you know, will play a huge role when it comes to building resiliency. Now, if you are a small and medium-sized enterprises, understanding this global landscape and how it's evolving is definitely essential. But more important, it's understanding what are the specific actions that manufacturing companies, especially those who operate at global level, are taking to reinforce their capabilities and therefore be able to align with them. And I could say that we could group those new capabilities or actions aimed at building resiliency in three main baskets. I mean, the first one is that most manufacturing companies who operate at a global level are trying to diversify their pool of suppliers, right? If disruptions happen at a global level, you still need to be able to be operating locally or at least regionally. So if you are, you know, a supplier, an SME who is in the operations manufacturing space, you may have an opportunity, you know, to look at some of that reconfiguration that is going on and develop new connections and be able to integrate new supply chains. So I think that there's a challenge because diversification will also affect, you know, your position on one hand, but may also open new opportunities. I think what is important when we talk about reconfiguration of supply chain, diversification of suppliers, looking at double or multiple supply sourcing, I think what is important is that what we are seeing is that the relationship between OEMs and suppliers, which are often small and medium-sized enterprises, you know, it's changing. The nature of the relation is changing. Before it was all about cost cutting and just in time, you know, we are seeing companies engaging in new conversations in which they talk about partnership, in which they talk about collaboration, in which the OEMs, you know, have themselves a strong interest in making sure that their suppliers, the SMEs they work with, join them in this transformation journey. I was with the chief procurement officer of a large manufacturing company last week, And she mentioned that she wanted to change her title for in the future move from being chief procurement officer to being chief partnership officer. And I think that that's revealing and quite amazing. So think about this ongoing reconfiguration as an opportunity and not just as a challenge, but also, look at the need to build new type of relationships with your customers, especially if you are in a B2B space. The second trend or the second dimension that is a must do and must have is what we call digitization. And in particular for SMEs, what is important to understand is that when we talk about digitalization, we are not always talking about expensive technologies. I have seen manufacturing small and medium-sized enterprises, leveraging, for example, cloud technology and basic data analytics and smart commercial watches to be able to get real-time alerts and information from their machines, and therefore reduce downtime and be able to run maintenance operations in a much faster way, right? And therefore, not just reducing downtime, but increasing productivity. So don't always look at technology as something expensive that is not achievable. Back to the concept we discussed before of agile and taking a practical approach. Think about the very specific production or business issues you are trying to address, and what are the different technologies, a standalone or in combination, that could help you address those. And very often what comes out is those technologies are not necessarily the most expensive one, and many of those are affordable also for SMEs, but it's also on the SME front, where governments are playing a big role in supporting the access and adoption to technology. And then maybe the last and third concept is that if you think about supply chain reconfiguration and resiliency going forward, you cannot avoid talking and looking into sustainability. There's probably no manufacturing organization that is going to be resilient going forward without a clear sustainability strategy and plan in place. I mean, we are talking about containing, climate warming by 1.5 degrees. We know that this decade is the decade for delivery. So I think that, pressure is coming from the environment itself, but it's also going to be coming from regulators, from customers. So it's important to factor in your digital transformation, your resiliency building plans, the sustainability concept as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Francesco. I think 3 great points you've mentioned, and I would like to also have Salih here. Maybe he'd have something to add to the topic of value chains and supply chain, And I think supply chain is a very important topic when it comes to sustainability of a business. So what are maybe some of the advice you would give to these manufacturers locally, internationally, where to look and what to make sure shouldn't go wrong so that they can resume their operations as is without any defects or without any delay in any kind of transaction that will happen in the future?
So again, I'll add to what Lori said, Francesco, and Mark is our risk management guru here. But we all know container prices quadrupled, right? If someone has the exact number, it's about 3-4 times the cost, getting access to materials. And this is something that I've been seeing a lot. Resilience is also a big word that Mark mentioned. What we have been seeing here, and what we have been building over the past 4 or 5 years, is to invest heavily in our local supply chain, in our local manufacturers, to ensure that whenever a disruption happens, we will be able to not only supply ourselves, but we have supplied Europe, the GCC, and China in face masks when the pandemic happens. So again, we made the bet, and it happened to be a very good bet. So this is something very important that we are saying, and it all has to be driven by economical incentives. If it's not financially feasible for the company, no one else from China or from Europe would buy it. So this is something that we're trying to focus on to ensure that the government is reducing the cost of business, giving access to companies to deliver the products that they need based on the vision and the market gaps that they're finding. Again, pandemic was a great opportunity either to create options. Our pharmaceutical, we've got a couple of pharmaceutical players that had great returns during the pandemic, and also for local suppliers to start supplying all the cotton roots that have happened. So glad to have seen it work well during the pandemic.
Thank you, Saleh. Maybe last two questions for today. We'll go to startup Genome. Mark. So what business models do you see emerging for SMEs, and which ones do you predict to prove success in the long run based on what is happening dynamically in the current time frame?
Thank you. I spoke to some of what you were asking me, so maybe if you don't mind, I'll spend 1 or 2 minutes to bring up a misconception and something that I would like to give to entrepreneurs as a key takeaway here. We oftentimes think of competition, right? And we oftentimes think of making our products and our services as defensible as possible. And therefore, we tend to stay out of conversations and interactions and partnerships in these days. And what we actually see in our Global Startup Ecosystem report and the research that we've done with over 50,000 SME and startup leaders is that those that have stronger ties with their local and their global startup ecosystem, meaning the more time they spend with the local mentors, with local investors, and with local peers, those startups, those SMEs tend to grow their revenues twice as fast and try to really globalize their business and their services twice as fast too. We also see that those SME leaders and startup leaders that are plugged into global startup ecosystems in London, in San Francisco, etc., to stay up to date with latest trends, latest technologies, they too are able to build better and more global business models. They too are able to engage in global markets faster, and therefore also see their revenue grow almost twice as fast versus those that are not really managing to participate in the ecosystem in that sense. And therefore, again, I would be sector agnostic. I think the opportunities are endless in each of the sectors, but what really matters in these days is what kind of skills and what kind of management behavior you're applying for your own good, but then also to manage your company and to manage a stakeholder network around you. And then you can succeed in life sciences, you can succeed in artificial intelligence, but you can also succeed in advanced manufacturing.
So thank you so much, Mark. And so we come to a conclusion to today's panel discussion. I believe this is the first, and we're kicking off this week filled with lots of events, lots of workshops. That's just the beginning with our panel today that focused on reorienting for growth opportunities in a post-pandemic economy. We thank you, Mr. Saleh, for attending from the Ministry of Economy and Industry and Commerce. Laurie Becard, thank you for attending from Google Cloud. It was a pleasure having you here in the studio. We'd also like to thank you, Mr. Francesco, attending to this session from the World Economic Forum. And Mark as well, thank you for being here representing Startup Genome. Dear listeners or viewers across the screens, we're very happy. We hope that you have enjoyed our content for today's panel discussion, as we are very thankful for your attendance and wish you a really enjoyable week-long filled with activities, workshops, and panel discussions. Thank you so much.